cold night, a warm dream. The wind tonight was a honed blade, stripping away any pretense of warmth from Samuel's worn coat. He sought meager refuge beside Martha's diner, the brick wall a flimsy bulwark against the invasive gusts. A cacophony of conviviality and cutlery escaped the diner's bright portal, casting fleeting, amber-tinged squares on the frosty glass. Blurred faces, alive with mirth, flickered past. He conjured the scent of sizzling pork, the solace of a steaming mug. Simple joys, now unattainable privileges. Each vaporous breath he expelled was a stark testament to the icy tendrils that had burrowed deep. He rubbed his hands, the callous skin rasping against itself. A bolt of agony lanced through his knee, a persistent echo of miles traversed and skirmishes endured in a life that haunted him both distantly and intimately. His vision swam, the diner dissolving into the shimmering heat haze of a desert landscape. The guttural thrum of a Humvee vibrated in his skull, the abrasive kiss of sand stinging his eyes. Youthful vigor coursed through him then. Sergeant Samuel Jones, leading his men through perilous terrain. He recalled the reassuring heft of his rifle, the metallic tang of trepidation, the unwavering devotion he felt toward his squad. A sandstorm, sudden and savage, had engulfed them, obliterating sight, choking their airways. Lost and reeling, they'd stumbled into an ambush. He saw the muzzle flashes, heard the piercing cries, felt the frantic scramble for cover. Ramirez had fallen, his uniform blossoming with a macabre flower of crimson. Without hesitation, Samuel had lunged forward, absorbing the enemy's onslaught, buying his men precious time to regroup. He'd caught a bullet in the leg, but they'd survived. All but Ramirez. The recollection clamped down, gilt a frigid stone in his gut. A medal had been bestowed upon him for valor, a token that felt less like honor and more like a millstone around his neck. What value was courage when it couldn't resurrect the fallen? What was the worth of service if it rendered you broken and cast aside? He blinked, the diner again a luminous haven in the encroaching darkness. The merriment within felt like mockery, the warmth a deliberate goad to his solitude. He was an exile, a phantom skirting the fringes of a world that had moved on, leaving him in its wake. A young couple spilled out from the diner, their faces radiant with affection. Pausing near him, they shared a lingering kiss, entirely unaware of his presence. Samuel averted his gaze, the display of tenderness a jab to his heart. He had once envisioned such a life, brimming with love and connection. But the war had plundered those aspirations, leaving him with nothing but enduring wounds and haunting regrets. The wind keened, a lament that mirrored the desolation within him. A violent tremor racked his frame as his body desperately fought to conserve heat. He knew his time out here was limited. Hypothermia, a silent predator, had claimed too many souls on these mean streets. He glanced once more at the diner, the lambent glow a siren's call. He hesitated, anticipating the inevitable. He'd enter, request a coffee, perhaps some toast. Dear Martha would undoubtedly sneak him something more, but then would follow the stares, the murmurs, the subtle acts of avoidance. People preferred to ignore the existence of the forgotten, the expendable. He conjured Ramirez, the ultimate sacrifice, the promises betrayed. He remembered the man he once was, a figure of pride and purpose, a believer in something greater. A spark of defiance flickered to life, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. He had earned a right to be here, to exist, to bask in warmth. He had served his nation, and he would not succumb to the cold or the disdain. Straightening his back, the ache in his knee a persistent memento, he inhaled deeply, the icy air searing his lungs. He refused to be invisible. He refused to feel shame. He emerged from the alleyway and advanced toward the diner, his footsteps punctuating the frozen ground. Reaching for the handle, his hand betrayed a slight tremor. He pulled the door open and stepped inside. A wave of heat enveloped him, a tangible embrace. The mingling scents of coffee and bacon flooded his senses, a comforting balm that eased the knotted muscles in his shoulders. He paused, allowing his eyes to adjust to the change in light. The buzz of conversation ebbed as eyes pivoted in his direction. He registered the curiosity, the pity, the unease. Dismissing them, he moved toward the counter, his focus fixed on Martha, stationed behind the register, her face a familiar beacon of solace. He was here. He was cold, and he was hungry. He was a veteran, and he deserved a moment's respite. Entering the light, the chime above the door, sharp and almost derisive, amplified Samuel's inner conflict. He lingered, his hand resting on the diner's frosted glass, drawn by the palpable promise of warmth inside, a solace he questioned whether he'd earned. A downward glance revealed his disheveled state, a coat held together by mismatched buttons fighting a losing battle against the layers beneath, boots caked in mud. He felt like a specter about to taint their cheerful sanctuary. He inhaled deeply, the frigid air pricking his lungs, and pushed his way in. The symphony of aromas assaulted him first. The savory sizzle of bacon, the robust scent of fresh coffee, a hint of sweet spice, perhaps cinnamon. This olfactory onslaught momentarily eclipsed the persistent hunger pangs in his gut. The diner throbbed with more life than he anticipated. Most booths occupied, a low thrum of voices mingling with the clink of silverware. Every pair of eyes seemed to fixate on him, not with a fleeting glance, but a prolonged, assessing appraisal. He discerned pity in some, disdain in others, and too often a glacial indifference. He understood their judgment, a derelict, a wanderer, a burden, a stark reminder of failures they preferred to keep buried, a ghost from a conflict they yearned to forget. Samuel shuffled further in, the cold linoleum a stark contrast to the imagined warmth. He kept his gaze downcast, focusing on the scuffed floor, striving for invisibility. "Well, what have we here?" The voice, rich and inviting, sliced through the oppressive quiet. Samuel lifted his head. Behind the counter stood Martha Jenkins, her face a testament to a life seasoned with kindness and resilience. Her gray hair was neatly confined in a bun, and her blue eyes shone with genuine warmth. A dish towel was clutched in her hand, her generous form exuding a comforting solidity. Her smile remained unwavering, devoid of the pity he'd witnessed in other glances. It was a simple, honest expression, sufficient to momentarily ease the knot of shame constricting his chest. "Come on in, hon. Don't just stand there freezing. Grab a seat at the counter. I've got a fresh pot of coffee calling your name." Samuel hesitated, his gaze flickering towards the occupied booths. He didn't want to trespass, to impose his unwelcome presence upon those so clearly ill at ease. Martha seemed to pick up on his apprehension. "Nonsense," she declared, her tone firm yet gentle. "There's always room for one more at Martha's. Besides," she lowered her voice in a playful confidence, "Earl's been monopolizing that corner stool all morning, and he needs someone besides me to bore with his fishtails." She offered a wink, and Samuel returned a meager smile. He made his way to the counter, the stares of the other patrons following his every step. He selected the stool farthest from the crowd, hoping to minimize his intrusion. As he settled down, the cool vinyl a sharp reminder of his situation, he absorbed the details of the diner. The walls were painted a cheerful daffodil yellow, decorated with vintage advertisements for Coca-Cola and local businesses. A silent jukebox occupied a corner, its chrome glinting under the fluorescent lights. It was a modest, unpretentious place, yet it emanated a sense of security. Martha placed a steaming mug before him, the aroma a welcome jolt to his senses. "Cream and sugar?" she inquired. "Just black, please," Samuel croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. He took a careful sip, the heated liquid coursing through him, chasing away the chill. It was the most exquisite coffee he'd tasted in years. As he relished the warmth, he caught sight of a couple in a nearby booth, their heads bent together in whispers, casting furtive glances his way. The woman's face was contorted with distaste, the man's a study in awkwardness. Martha, with her back still turned, seemed blissfully unaware. "So," she said, leaning against the counter. What'll it be, hon? Something to chase away the cold, I imagine. Samuel looked down at his hands, rough and weathered. His meager funds barely cover a cup of coffee, let alone a proper meal. Yet the enticing smells were overwhelming, and his stomach growled in protest. I don't have much, he mumbled, the familiar wave of shame washing over him. Martha straightened, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. Don't you fret about that, she stated, her voice edged with resolve. Everyone deserves a warm meal, especially on a night like this. Now, tell me what you'd like, and we'll sort something out. He hesitated, then, emboldened by her kindness and the relentless hunger, he ventured, maybe just a bowl of soup? And some bread, if you have it. Coming right up, Martha replied, turning towards the stove. As she filled a bowl with a generous portion of steaming broth, she glanced over her shoulder at the whispering couple. Her eyes flashed a silent warning, a clear message that their prejudice was not welcome in her establishment. Samuel witnessed it, and a spark of hope ignited within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, he wasn't entirely inconsequential after all. Perhaps, within this small, brightly illuminated haven, he could discover a moment of solace. Badge and prejudice. The diner bell chimed, a jarring counterpoint to the sudden chill that permeated the space as Officer Derek Miller entered, his presence a blustering declaration of authority. Davis, his shadow, trailed just behind. Miller's gaze, a honed instrument of suspicion, swept the room, pausing on a young couple sharing a saccharine moment before laser-locking onto Samuel. A palpable tension settled. The clatter of cutlery softened to a nervous tick. Even the grill seemed to hush its sizzle. Martha, wiping down the counter, met the officers with a practiced, tight smile. "Morning, gentlemen. What can I get you started with?" Miller disregarded her, eyes pinned on Samuel. He swaggered to Samuel's booth, his boots a rhythmic drumbeat against the worn floor. Davis, smirking, leaned against the neighboring booth, effectively corralling Samuel. The simple act of drinking coffee now felt like a transgression to Samuel, a knot twisting in his gut. He looked up, meeting Miller's hard, unwavering stare. The officer's hand idled near his sidearm. "Morning," Miller drawled, the words slick with veiled accusation. "Mind if I join you?" Before Samuel could respond, Miller slid into the booth, forcing Samuel to compress himself against the cracked vinyl. Davis remained a looming sentry. Martha, her knuckles bone-white around a dish rag, watched from behind the counter, wishing for the courage to intervene. "So," Miller began, his voice laced with disdain, "what brings a man like you to a place like this?" Samuel swallowed, fighting to ignore the officer's loaded tone. "Just coffee, officer." "Coffee, huh?" Miller barked, a humorless laugh. "Nothing else on the agenda? No plans to, perhaps, lighten someone's load?" His gaze lingered on a woman fumbling with her handbag. Davis chuckled in accompaniment. "Just routine, you understand. Keeping the streets tidy." Samuel's jaw clenched. He knew the code. Black, broke, therefore suspect. The familiar burn of injustice flared. He kept his voice level with effort. "I've done nothing wrong." "That's the standard refrain," Miller sneered. "Let's see some identification." Samuel hesitated, resenting the intrusion. But resistance, he knew, would be futile. He reached into his worn jacket, retrieving his wallet, his fingers betraying a slight tremor. He presented his veteran's card. Miller snatched it, scrutinizing it with exaggerated suspicion. "Samuel Jones," he read, dragging out each syllable with calculated emphasis. "Served in Afghanistan. Well, a hero." The word was a sarcastic projectile. "So what happened, Jones? Did the hero lose his bearings back home?" Davis snickered, adding fuel to the fire. "Typical story. Can't adjust to the real world." Samuel's expression hardened. Any lingering comfort, any spark of optimism ignited by Martha's warmth, dissolved, leaving him hollow and exposed. "I serve my country," Samuel stated flatly, "and we are eternally grateful for your service," Miller said, the words oozing insincerity. "But that doesn't give you carte blanche. Now, Where are you residing, Jones? That's my business, Samuel retorted, unable to completely mask his anger. Miller slammed a hand on the table, startling Samuel. It becomes my business when you're loitering in my town, looking like you just crawled out of the gutter. We have ordinances against vagrancy, you know. Martha's resolve snapped. She strode to the booth, her face flushed with indignation. Officer Miller, she began, her voice shaking, yet firm. Mr. Jones is a paying guest in my establishment. He has done nothing to warrant this treatment. I will not tolerate you harassing him in my diner. Miller turned his gaze on Martha, his eyes narrowing into slits. This is none of your concern, Martha. Stay out of it. It becomes my concern when I see someone treated unfairly, she countered. Either place an order or leave Mr. Jones in peace. Miller held Martha's gaze, his face a rigid mask of suppressed fury, calculating the cost of challenging her defiance. Finally, he sighed, a sound of grudging concession. Fine, he spat, his voice dripping with venom. But we'll be watching you, Jones. Don't think you're getting away with anything. He pushed out of the booth, Davis mirroring his movements, offering Samuel a final sneer. As they approached the counter, Miller's voice, carefully amplified, carried to Samuel's ears. Just another freeloader trying to bleed the system dry. Samuel watched them go, his hands clenched into fists, the diner's warmth now a suffocating weight. The fragile hope that had briefly flickered within him was now extinguished, replaced by the stark, chilling reality of prejudice and injustice. Coffee and contempt. He paid. Martha said, her voice firm, cutting through the simmering tension. The scent of frying bacon hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the bitterness of the moment. Miller ignored her, his gaze fixed on Samuel. Did you now? And where'd you get the money for this coffee, soldier? The word soldier dripped with disdain. Samuel met his gaze, his own eyes steady. I had it. I paid at the counter, same as anyone else. He kept his voice even, devoid of the tremor that threatened to betray his fear. That's right, Martha interjected, wiping her hands on her apron. He paid me himself, $1.50 with a dime for the jukebox, which I told him was broke. She emphasized he and me, a silent challenge to Miller's blatant disbelief. Miller finally turned his attention to her, a sneer twisting his lips. And you're just going to vouch for him, Martha? Seems mighty convenient, don't it? He's a customer, Martha retorted, planting her hands on her hips. Just like any other. He's got the right to sit here and drink his coffee in peace. Davis shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Miller, Martha, and Samuel. He cleared his throat, a nervous tick. Loitering, Miller spat, turning back to Samuel. That's what this is. Loitering. You got no home, no job, just wandering around, leeching off decent folk. We got laws against that, soldier. The diner felt smaller now, the booths closing in. The aroma of coffee, once comforting, now felt suffocating. Samuel took a slow, deliberate sip, the hot liquid burning a path down his throat. He needed to remain calm, to not give Miller the satisfaction of seeing him break. I'm not loitering, Samuel said, placing the mug gently on the table. I bought a cup of coffee. I'm drinking it. And how long you planning on drinking it, huh? All day. All week. Turn this place into your personal flop house. Miller leaned closer, invading Samuel's personal space. The metallic tang of Miller's badge pressed against Samuel's arm. Martha stepped forward, placing herself between them. He'll leave when he's done, just like any other customer. Now, why don't you two go bother someone else? Miller's eyes narrowed. You're interfering with an officer of the law, Martha. That's a crime itself. And you're harassing a paying customer. Martha shot back, her voice rising. Now, either order something or get out. A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Miller's face flushed crimson. He seemed to consider his options, weighing the consequences of escalating the situation further. Finally, he straightened up, taking a step back. Fine, he said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. But don't think this is over, soldier. We'll be watching you. One wrong move, you're going downtown. He gestured to Davis, and they turned and walked towards the door, their boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Miller paused at the threshold, turning back to glare at Samuel. And next time, try earning an honest living. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Martha turned to Samuel, her face etched with concern. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softer now. Samuel nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the empty doorway. The brief flicker of hope he'd felt earlier had been extinguished, replaced by a cold, familiar despair. He knew this wouldn't be the last time. This was just a taste of what was to come. He looked up at Martha, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Martha simply nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and anger. She knew she couldn't protect him forever, but for now, at least, he was safe within the walls of her diner. A voice of reason. Martha's hands found her hips, the floral print of her apron pulling taut across her robust figure. "Now, look here, Officer Miller," she declared, the gentle lilt of her voice now honed to a sharp edge. "You're badgering a paying customer. Coffee ordered, coffee paid for, quiet customer. What's the trouble?" Miller puffed out his chest, the starburst of his badge catching the diner's sterile light. "The trouble, ma'am, is vagrancy. This ain't a shelter." "Vagrancy?" Martha's scoff was a plume of indignation. "He's been here less than an hour. Half the town dawdles over coffee. Gonna clock every soul who walks through that door? Doesn't seem like a haven for loiterers in here right now." Officer Davis, lingering near the entrance, cleared his throat, a nervous tick. Younger, his face held a shadow of discomfort. "Easy, Derek," he murmured, barely a breath. "No need for this." Miller's glare could sour cream. "Stay put, Davis." Back to Martha, his face flushed. "It's about maintaining decorum, ma'am. Keeping the town secure." "Secure from what?" Martha challenged, her eyes narrowing to slits. "A quiet man with a coffee? Or are you chasing him off because he's different?" The word hung unspoken, heavy as a stone. Samuel, a silent observer until now, shifted in his seat, the lukewarm coffee in his mug forgotten. He understood. He felt the weight of assumptions, clinging like a second skin. Davis squirmed, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. He knew Miller's game. They all did. "That's uncalled for, Martha," Miller snapped, voice climbing. "I'm doing my duty." "Duty is protection and service," Martha countered, her voice unwavering as a compass. "Not bullying. He's broken no law. He deserves the same courtesy as any other patron. And I'll be double dog damned if I let you treat him otherwise." The diner fell silent, save for the low drone of the refrigerator. Martha stood firm, her gaze a lock on Miller. He seemed to shrink under her fierce stare. Finally, a defeated sigh escaped him, and he raked a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Fine," he conceded, voice tight with resentment. "But he can't squat here all day." "He'll leave when he's ready," Martha stated, her voice brooking no argument. "And right now, he needs a telephone." She turned to Samuel, her tone softening. "Is there anyone you need to call, dear?" Samuel looked up, surprised by her directness. He had remained silent since the officers appeared, yet she had glimpsed something in him, a quiet resilience that defied his disheveled appearance. After a moment of hesitation, he gave a slow nod. "Yes, ma'am, there is." Miller huffed. "He doesn't require any calls. He needs to move on." Martha whirled on him, her eyes blazing like twin embers. "He will make that call, officer, this instant, unless you possess a warrant preventing it." Miller sputtered, indignation rising, but Martha gave him no opening. "The phone's right over there," she told Samuel, indicating the payphone mounted by the restrooms. "Help yourself. It's on the house." Samuel rose slowly, his joints creaking a soft protest. He met Martha's eyes, a spark of gratitude flickering within. He walked towards the phone, feeling the officer's gazes like a tangible weight on his back. Reaching into his pocket, he retrieved a worn quarter and slid it into the slot. He lifted the receiver, the plastic cool against his ear, and began to dial. The call. The echo of Officer Miller's departing tirade still throbbed in Samuel's head, a dull counterpoint to the diner's hum. Martha's face held a worry he couldn't meet, shame prickling hotter than the untouched coffee. He needed to bolt, to dissolve back into the road's vast indifference. Not yet, though. First, the call. He straightened, the tremor in his legs diminished now that Miller was gone. He met Martha's gaze, a silent plea for understanding etched there. "Ma'am," his voice rasped, coated with disuse. "Could I use your phone?" Martha's worry softened into kindness. "Of course, Samuel. It's right behind the counter." She indicated the wall-mounted rotary, its ebony surface reflecting the fluorescent glare. He moved toward it, each footfall a small rebellion against the day's abasement. The Bakelite receiver was cool beneath his palm, a strange source of solace. A nascent hope, fragile as a just-struck match, flared within him. He paused, the receiver pressed to his ear, the dial tone a strident drone. Eyes closed, he conjured the number, a lifeline coded into his memory. It led to a world of starched collars, unquestioned respect, a purpose he yearned to reclaim. He inhaled deeply and began to dial. The rotary clicked and whirred, the sound amplified by the diner's stillness. He felt Martha's quiet observation, a silent show of support. Each rotation tightened the coil in his gut. What if there was no answer? What if he'd been erased from memory? What if? Finally, the last digit landed. He held his breath, listening to the rhythmic pulse on the other end. Once, twice, each ring stretched into an age. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, broke the silence. "Thompson." Samuel's grip tightened on the receiver. Years had passed, yet the voice was instantly recognizable. Authority, command, and unwavering loyalty resonated within it. "General Thompson?" Samuel's voice was barely audible. A pause, a moment of stunned quiet on the other end. Then a shift, a touch of warmth infusing the brusque tone. "Who is this?" Samuel swallowed, words snagging in his throat. "Sir, it's Jones. Samuel Jones." Another longer pause. Samuel could almost feel the general's mind sifting through old files, connecting distant dots. He braced for the inevitable barrage of questions, the incredulity, the brush-off. But instead, the general spoke again, his voice now threaded with surprise and something more. Relief, perhaps. "Jones? Samuel Jones? By God, boy, is that really you? I thought, well, no matter what I thought. Where are you, son? What in God's name happened to you?" A note of genuine concern resonated in the general's tone, a stark contrast to the day's cold shoulders. The words poured from Samuel, a rush of fragmented explanations, his disillusionment, the sting of prejudice. He avoided details, unwilling to burden the general with the grit of his street-level existence. Just that he was in a small Ohio town, scraping by, trying to find his footing. "Ohio, huh?" The general's voice was pensive. "Listen to me, Jones. You stay put. Don't move. I'm making a call. Someone will be there to collect you within the hour." Samuel was speechless. "Sir, I don't want to cause any trouble." A low chuckle, a deep vibration through the wires. "Trouble? Jones, you were never trouble. You were one of the finest I ever had the honor of leading. Now you just sit tight. Consider it a direct order." The line went dead. Samuel stood there, receiver still pressed to his ear, the dial tone a persistent drone in his head. Slowly, he lowered the phone, his hand trembling now not from fear, but a burgeoning hope. He met Martha's gaze, a blend of curiosity and anticipation etched in her kind eyes. A weak smile flickered across his face. He's sending someone." Martha's eyes widened. "Someone? Who?" Samuel didn't answer. He couldn't know who the general would dispatch, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep, that his life was on the cusp of transformation. He replaced the receiver and looked up, a hint of defiance returning to his gaze. The world hadn't forgotten him entirely, and, just maybe, there was still a place for him within it. The general's fury. The receiver felt heavy in Samuel's hand, the plastic strangely slick against his palm. He watched Miller and Davis exchange smirks, their eyes glued to him with undisguised amusement. The clatter of Martha cleaning tables faded into a muted background hum as General Thompson's voice, sharp and familiar, crackled through the speaker. "Jones? Samuel Jones, is that really you?" Samuel took a slow, deliberate breath. "Yes, General. It's me." "Good Lord, man, where have you been? We thought—" "Well, it doesn't matter now. Just tell me you're all right." "I'm alive, General. That's about it." He paused, gathering his thoughts, trying to filter the past months into a coherent narrative. "I'm in Harmony Creek, a small town a few hours west of the city. There's been an incident." He could practically feel Thompson's impatience vibrating through the phone line. "An incident? What kind of incident, Jones? You know I haven't got all day. I'm about to go into an important meeting." Samuel's gaze flickered to Miller, who was now openly mimicking his posture, puffing out his chest and holding an imaginary phone to his ear. Davis chuckled, slapping him on the back. Samuel ignored them. He'd faced down worse than two small-town cops drunk on power. "I was trying to get some food at a diner, Martha's Diner. I was accused of vagrancy, harassed." "Officer Miller here." He inclined his head slightly towards the smirking officer, decided I fit the description of someone he was looking for. "Vagrancy." Thompson's voice took on an edge. "Samuel, you're a decorated veteran. You served this country with distinction. What the hell is going on there?" Miller snorted. "Decorated bum, more like." He muttered just loud enough for Samuel to hear. Samuel pressed on, his voice even. "I tried to explain, General. I showed him my discharge papers. He wasn't interested. He ran my name anyway, found nothing, but insisted I leave town. He threatened me with arrest if I didn't." "Arrest? On what grounds?" The General's voice was rising. "Loitering, I believe, was the charge he was considering. He seemed particularly displeased that I couldn't provide a local address." Samuel felt a flicker of grim satisfaction as he saw a flicker of unease cross Miller's face. Davis, sensing the shift, nudged Miller. "Relax, Derek. What's the old one going to do? Complain to the mayor? Did this officer—" "Miller, you say? Did he know who you were, Jones?" "I told him, General. I told him my name, my rank. I even mentioned I knew you." A pregnant silence stretched from the phone. Samuel could almost see the General's face, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. Then the explosion. "He knew, and he still treated you like that? Like some common criminal?" The General's voice was a thunderclap. "Give me that officer. Now." Samuel, surprised by the vehemence, held the phone out to Miller. The officer hesitated, his bravado faltering. He looked from Samuel to Davis, a question in his eyes. Davis shrugged, a forced nonchalance in his gesture. Miller stepped forward, snatching the phone from Samuel's hand. "Miller here," he barked into the receiver. The ensuing silence was deafening. Samuel watched as the color drained from Miller's face. His eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over a chair. Davis reached out to steady him, his own expression turning from amusement to concern. "Yes, sir. Yes, General Thompson, sir. I understand, sir. No, sir, I wasn't aware. Sir, with all due respect," Miller stammered, his voice cracking. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. The General's fury, though unheard by Samuel, was clearly palpable. Every few seconds, Miller would squeeze his eyes shut, nod jerkily, and mutter another strained "yes, sir." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Miller lowered the phone, his hand shaking. He stared at Samuel, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He looked like he was about to be sick. "He wants to speak to you again," Miller croaked, his voice barely a whisper. He held out the phone with a trembling hand. The chief's reprimand. The cloying sweetness of Martha's apple pie, usually a comfort, struggled to mask the acrid tang of rising dread. Miller loomed over Samuel, his face contorted in petty dominance, a glint of cruel amusement dancing in his gaze. Davis, propped against the counter, savored the unfolding scene, a twisted grin plastered on his face. "I posed a query, Jones," Miller drawled, each word laced with disdain. "Where do you imagine you'll scurry off to? Back to the gutters? Back to your pathetic pleas?" Samuel remained mute, his stare focused beyond Miller, refusing to acknowledge him. The jarring jangle of the telephone cleaved the thick atmosphere. It was a persistent, insistent demand, brooking no delay. Martha, wiping her hands on her gingham apron, rushed to answer, a crease of worry etching her brow. Calls this late were uncommon. Harmony Creek Diner, Martha speaking, she announced, her voice carefully even. A moment passed, and her eyes widened, a flush draining from her cheeks. "Yes, Chief," she stammered, extending the receiver towards Miller with a shaking hand. "It's for you." Surprise flickered across Miller's face before he snatched the phone, his expression a blend of irritation and suspicion. "Miller here," he barked. The impact was immediate. The blood seemed to drain from Miller's face, leaving him pallid. His previously assertive posture dissolved into a defeated slump. Sensing the sudden shift in dynamics, Davis straightened, his smirk vanishing like frost in sunlight. He edged closer, straining to catch snippets of the one-sided exchange. "Yes, sir." "No, sir." "Understood, sir." Miller's voice was a reedy whisper, barely audible over the diner's gentle hum. Each syllable was punctuated by a visible swallow. His knuckles, clutching the phone, were bleached white. Martha watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd never witnessed Miller so utterly diminished. The transformation was jarring. Even Samuel, behind his stoic mask, seemed to register the changing winds. His eyes flickered towards Miller, a spark of something akin to hope kindling within. Though muffled, the chief's voice was a rolling, wrathful thunder that seemed to vibrate through the diner's very foundation. Fragments cut through the noise. Unacceptable, disgrace, the abuse of authority. Davis's face mirrored Miller's growing despair. He knew, with a sinking certainty, that this was a catastrophe. He risked a glance at Samuel, who remained impassive, yet held himself with a newly found dignity. Miller's shoulders sagged, all the air knocked out of him. After what felt like an eternity, he rasped, "Yes, sir. I will, sir. Thank you, sir." He slammed the receiver down, the plastic protesting with a sharp crack. A weighty hush fell over the diner, thick and suffocating. The previously comforting aroma of apple pie now felt oppressive. Miller stared blankly at the counter, his eyes glazed over. Frozen, Davis was unsure of what to do. Finally, Miller spoke, his voice a toneless husk. "Davis," he said, avoiding his partner's gaze. "We're suspended. Immediately." Davis's jaw went slack. Suspended? What for? Miller remained silent, his gaze fixed on the speckled Formica countertop. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, he said, "For conduct unbecoming. For harassment. For abusing our positions." He finally met Davis's eyes, and in them, Davis saw not anger, but a profound and terrifying understanding. They had tangled with the wrong adversary. He stole a nervous glance at Samuel, now standing erect, his shoulders squared. Samuel's expression was unreadable, but an aura of quiet triumph emanated from him. It was as if a crushing burden had been shed. Miller turned to Martha, his face a canvas of shame. I apologize for the disturbance, ma'am," he mumbled, his voice a bare thread. Without waiting for a reply, he turned and headed for the door, Davis trailing behind him like a chastened hound. As they vanished into the night, Martha released a shaky exhale. She looked at Samuel, her eyes brimming with a mix of relief and trepidation. What just happened?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. Samuel offered a small, weary smile. "Let's just say," he murmured, "some debts are finally coming due." Dignity restored. A miniature cyclone, roused by the black sedan, pirouetted briefly outside Martha's diner before surrendering to the still air, leaving a gritty residue on the glass. Samuel, still reeling from the abrupt downfall of Miller and Davis, watched a lean figure extract itself from the vehicle. The man moved with an innate authority, his presence undeniable even in civilian dress. An enveloping overcoat obscured most of his clothing, but Samuel spotted the gleaming insignia on his lapels, stars. Thompson. His throat tightened. Decades had passed since their last encounter. A torrent of memories, some vivid, others ghost-like, surged, searing heat, the din of combat, shared terror, absolute fidelity. He hadn't foreseen this visit. He'd anticipated nothing at all. The general breached the diner's threshold, a rush of cool air preceding him like an advance guard. His eyes swept the room, locking on his Samuel. A measured smile dawned, hinting at both genuine warmth and the grim resolve of a seasoned commander. "Jones," he rumbled, his voice resonating in the closed space. He extended a hand. "Samuel Jones. It's been far too long." Samuel pushed himself to his feet, his joints protesting. He grasped the general's hand, the vice-like grip a palpable connection to a past he believed interred. "General Thompson." "Sir, I didn't expect." "Nonsense, Jones. When word reached me, well, let's just say I needed confirmation." The general's gaze flickered towards Martha, who was diligently polishing the counter. "My thanks for your hospitality," he addressed her. "I understand you've offered Mr. Jones a measure of solace." Martha puffed up a little, a faint rose tinting her cheeks. "He's a decent man, General. Deserves better than he's gotten." The general inclined his head, refocusing on Samuel. "We need to talk, Jones. Somewhere with a bit more privacy." He indicated the booths in the back. They gravitated to a booth by the window. The cool vinyl bit through Samuel's threadbare jacket. The general shrugged off his overcoat, revealing a sharply tailored suit. He projected power. "I pulled a few levers," the general stated, cutting to the chase. "Heard about the situation. Miller and Davis are no longer a concern. I ensured that." Samuel nodded, almost undone by the cascade of relief. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, Jones. You earned this, and far more than you've received. I recall the commendations, the citations, the lies you pulled from the fire. You were a goddamn hero, Jones." The general's eyes burned with conviction. This is no way to treat someone like you." He extracted a card from his inner pocket. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Davies. She oversees a veteran support initiative for the state. She awaits your call. Housing, medical care, employment assistance, whatever your needs, she can address them." Samuel accepted the card, his fingertips tracing the raised print. A fragile hope, thought extinguished, flickered anew. "There's more," the general pressed on. "The governor's office is aware. They want to rectify matters. There's talk of an official recognition, a public apology, some gesture to acknowledge your service and the wrong that was done." Samuel shook his head, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude. "I don't require that, sir. I just want to be left in peace." "I understand, Jones. However, this extends beyond you. It's about setting an example, demonstrating that we value those who have served, that we stand by our own." The general leaned in, his tones softening. "Allow us to help you, Jones. Allow us to restore what was taken." Martha materialized beside the booth, bearing a steaming platter. "Figured you both could use some sustenance. It's on me." She set the plate before Samuel, a generous helping of meatloaf, mashed potatoes adrift in gravy, and bright green beans, the aroma filling the air. Samuel gazed at the food, then at Martha, his eyes brimming with gratitude. He hadn't been aware of his hunger. "Thank you, Martha," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. The general smiled. "Looks exceptional. I may have to sample some myself." As Samuel ate, the general entertained Martha with anecdotes of Samuel's past, tales of valor and ingenuity, unwavering loyalty and dedication. Martha listened, her eyes reflecting admiration. Other patrons began to drift closer, drawn by the general's resonant voice and fragments of overheard conversation. Soon, Samuel found himself surrounded by a small crowd, neighbors, acquaintances, total strangers, all offering words of encouragement and support. The diner's ambience had undergone a sea change, morphing from quiet unease to vibrant camaraderie. He witnessed respect in their gazes, not pity, not dread, but genuine respect. He ate slowly, relishing each mouthful, the food nourishing both body and spirit. He scanned the assembly, the smiles, the outstretched hands. He saw a community community that seemed to be taking him back. The dignity that had been stripped away and trampled upon was slowly being repaired. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Samuel Jones felt a tentative bloom of hope, a sense that perhaps he could recover the man he once was.